Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's podcast, we're gonna understand what exactly selenium is, its brief history, and some features of it. So some interesting facts will be there about it, and like this question could be asked in your interviews, but this is like not very frequent nowadays. So no one asks you what is selenium. Maybe someone can ask you as a fresher, so you can put out these valid points or these interesting story, so like they will be get to know that you did some well researched, okay, about the selenium. So let's get started. So now let's start with what is selenium. So if I talk about we have read so many articles, okay, and most of the time the answer that I got is that it's an automation testing tool and it's used for web based application testing, right? So if I talk about web based testing, let's say we are saying that selenium is only for web based application testing, right? So is this only tool for web based testing or there are others? No, right? This is not the only tool. There are other tools also available for web based testing, not just Selenium. And they are the biggest competitor of Selenium, which I believe everybody knows about, like QTP, right? So, which is known as UFT these days. And the demand for QTP prior to Selenium was very huge. There was a lot of openings. Many companies were working on QTP for their automation stuff. And slowly, these days, we have seen that many organizations are leaving this QTP, or currently named as UFT, right? And now they are moving towards Selenium. So right now, if you see that 90% of the market, including big organizations, are working on Selenium. There are like these CMM5 level companies, like those FANG companies, we can say Google, Facebook, Microsoft. So many big brands are actually working with Selenium, right? They are using Selenium for their automation testing. So QTP, like it supports web based testing as well as desktop based applications as well. Like Selenium, if we talk about only Selenium, so it only supports the web based application. So now the question in your mind, like, then why the market is moving towards Selenium? Why not QTP? Why not RFT? So there are n number of automation tools in the market. Why only Selenium? So the best part of Selenium is that there are no license cost required to work with Selenium. So it's a completely open source tool. Now wait, you may ask what is open source, right? So open source means that you need not to pay even a single penny to use Selenium, whereas for QTP, it is a very expensive license. So let's say if you want QTP for a single user, so it will cost you around, I guess, 2000 to 4000 US dollar for per user. So like if a company is going for let's say license for 50 users, then you can imagine how big the cost will be, right? And if we talk about functionality wise, so Selenium provide the same functionality for free, okay. So now I believe you are getting some idea why companies are moving towards Selenium, right? And the only drawback of Selenium, I would say, it doesn't support the desktop based application or desktop based automation, okay. So we can only do the web based automation. But if we talk about the current market, so 75% of the projects are currently accessed using the URLs, right? And we also know that this is a cloud age, so everybody is moving towards the cloud computing, okay. So if everybody is moving towards cloud computing, then everything is on web, so we can access through like them through a link, right? So Selenium is one of the best automation tool for web-based application. Not just that, not just open source. There are many other open source automation tools available for web-based testing. But again, why Selenium is very popular and why the market for Selenium is very huge, right? So what exactly the reason behind it before that? Before okay, so first of all, let's see a little bit features of Selenium. So if you are familiar, if you have gone through some story over the internet about Selenium, so some brief history of Selenium. So Selenium, it actually supports multiple browser, and then Selenium is only web-based testing. So things will be executed on web only, right? So all major browsers in the world, I am saying major browsers, right? So those are supported by Selenium, be it Chrome, be it Firefox, be it Opera, be it Safari, right? So most of these browsers are supported by Selenium, and with Selenium we can use multiple programming languages like Java, Ruby, Python, or JavaScript. So we can say that all major languages are supported by Selenium, not just scripting language but object oriented programming language as well. And if we talk about QTP, so it is the biggest competitor of Selenium, right? So QTP, like which language QTP supports? So it supports the VB script, that is a scripting language, and it's not purely object oriented as well. Okay, and if we talk about VB script, so it's a Microsoft based language. Okay, so it is supported by Microsoft, so it is supported on Windows only. So like it means that if you are working on QTP, your automation is restricted only and only on Windows, right? Whereas if we talk about current market scenario, so there are many people who are working on a MacBook or working on a Linux machine or different other operating system. But if I talk about QTP, it only works on Windows. So at times the client requirement is like the client want to test his application or her application on all major platforms. He or she wants that his product should work fine on Windows, Linux, Mac, iOS, Solaris, Android, right? So all the major browser support his project, right? So whereas like if we talk about QTP, we can only test it on Windows, so we cannot perform testing on different platform. But on the other hand, if we talk about Selenium, we have just seen that how many languages it supports. So if we just talk about Java, Java is the one of the powerful programming language, and one of the open source language as well. And if you have ever installed Java, then the very first message you are going to see is that 3 billion devices runs on Java. So be it Linux, be it Symbian, Android, any other operating system, you name it, it's supported by Java. And if you are writing your Selenium code or Selenium automation script in Java, you can execute that code in any operating system that you want, and that is completely free of cost, right? So this is another thing about Selenium, is that it got multi OS support. So like multiple platforms support it. You can execute your code on Windows, on Linux, Mac, or iOS, or maybe in Android. So all the major operating systems are supported by Selenium. This is one of the best thing to use Selenium right now. So if I talk about language support, so language support doesn't mean that if my application were well built in Java, I'm going to automate things using Selenium with Java. Then again, if my application is built using Python, then I'll be learn Selenium with Python, and if it's built in Ruby, then I'll be learning Selenium with Ruby. It doesn't mean that, right? So if you are automating your website which is developed in Java, you will be learning Java from scratch, or you will be learning Selenium with Python from scratch. This is not the case, right? So Selenium is not language dependent. Your automation is not language dependent. So language support means initially Selenium was started in Java. So if I talk about the brief history of this project, then the very first thing we should be looking at is the main website of Selenium. So that is selenium.hq or seleniumhq.org, sorry. So that is the main website of Selenium. And if you see here, so you can see that the very first line says Selenium automates browser. That's it. So Selenium is only and only for web browser testing. Anything and everything available on web can easily automate using Selenium, right? If I go to the documentation part, so this is very important to note that the brief history of this project. So like if I talk about QTP, initially QTP was owned by a company called Mercury. So Mercury came up with QTP in the market, and then later on QTP has taken over in some way. If I talk about Selenium, so Selenium first came into life in 2004 by a developer called Jason Huggins, who used to work at ThoughtWorks. So he's the one who actually designed this project. Initially started Selenium as a Java project. So in order to automate his daily routine task, he has created a small project, and that project went to such an extent he thought of giving it some name and come up with the name called Selenium. And why only Selenium? So there is again a history behind this as well. So there is a history behind the name as well. So if I talk about QTP, so QTP was initially a product of marketing. So in 2004, like Mercury was actually winner of QTP. Now if we talk about Mercury, so in general terms, what exactly is Mercury? So I believe most of you have seen Mercury, where it's in the thermometer, right? So mercury is basically a poisonous element, right? So if someone takes mercury, then he'll die, surely. So if someone takes mercury, we give him an antidote that does what selenium is. Selenium is basically an antidote of mercury. So selenium kills mercury. That is the reason they have given this project the name as Selenium. So in this market of QTP, mercury, and up to like it went to such an extent, they are successful as well. Not just because of the cost, there are n number of other factors behind it. So the very first two components that come up in the market is Selenium RC and Selenium ID. This was launched with the Selenium 1.0, and now you can ask how many versions of Selenium are there. So after Selenium 1.0, 2.0 came into the market, then 3.0 came into the market, and currently 4.0 is in the market, right? So if I talk about Selenium 3, so what is that? That is nothing but a WebDriver. So like if I talk about the four components of Selenium, so one is RC, another is ID, then WebDriver, and fourth one is Grid. So these are the four components in which Selenium 1 was ID plus RC, Selenium 3.0 is a WebDriver, Selenium 2.0 is WebDriver plus some support of RC as well. So you may say 2.0 is a combination of WebDriver and RC. So our major focus will be on Selenium 3 because that is what market is currently working on. And the major thing about Selenium is that it is not a tool. Yes, it's not a tool. So if Selenium is not a tool, then what exactly it is? So we can say Selenium is a framework. We can say that it's a library. We can say that it's a project, or we can also say it's an API. Yes, Selenium is also called an API. And when I'm talking about API, I don't just relate it with REST or SOAP API. API is a huge term, and different topic altogether. So guys, I believe that this podcast already been too long, so we'll take a rest here, and with this I am your host signing off.